The recording has started.
Fire.
Let's do this.
Many Bothans lost their lives, it's true, to bring the news across the galactic view. From the outer rim to the core sphere's light, tune in this week and hold on tight.
Welcome to episode 3 of Across the Network. This week we bring you our very own Bothan deck doctor, George the Hulk Hudson. We discuss pre-release experience, Carbonite cracking, ban announcements, go down the rabbit hole a bit on the Jango problem, rules updates, and then our primary segment with George, deck building in a new environment. Enjoy the show! Alright, welcome to Across the Network. I'm Jonathan Fisher. I'm here with Ian Lego Pizza, back for our third episode. Welcome back, Ian.
Thank you, Jonathan. Super excited for the next episode. And we got a great guest today. We got George the Hulk Hudson.
Hello, everybody.
Fellow Bothan member, and I mean, he needs no introduction. Everybody knows who George is.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, I'm
appreciate it.
Excited to have George here. Yep, how you doing, George?
Doing fantastic. Excited to break some stuff, some fun stuff down for sure.
Yeah. So, listeners just heard that we're going to be covering what happened this week, a little bit about ban announcements, rules updates, and deck building. So let's just jump right in. We all had our pre-releases. Did you guys win your pre-releases?
I won one of mine.
Okay. Yep.
And in the classic George fashion, I showed up to one pre-release and I did go 4-0 with
Nice.
with a Asajj Red.
Ooh.
It's it satisfies my inner Timmy when you get to attack for like 10 to 11 damage. It's just like, yeah. I got myself a Banshee and shooting stuff down.
That's what I was gonna ask.
yeah. When you're just like, yeah, that 4 health unit over there. Nah, you're gone. So that was fun.
Yeah, my first pre-release, I did not do well. Went 1 and 2, lost to Stan, a teammate, and some other folks. And then my second pre-release, I went 4-0. And
Nice.
in that one, I opened 9 indirect damage cards, and of course had my Boba leader. I had 3 missile platforms, 3 of the 3-drop that does 3, and then 3 of the 2-drop that does 2 when it dies.
Oh, wow. That's
It
nuts.
was a lot.
Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
was-
seems
Watch
like
out.
unbeatable and limited. Holy cow.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good time pre-release. I'm excited to play set 4 now. That limited format, I thought it was really good actually.
Yeah, it was fun.
Have you
I'm
guys-
excited to draft and not have limited or sealed, to see how really far you can like push certain archetypes. Like, if you do the indirect damage thing and open a Boba or something, like that would be crazy, right? Like a Boba showcase, and then you get all the indirect cards. Like, that seems like such a fun little challenge to do. Some of the other ones that come to mind is like, I think Luke gets like way more consistent because you can just draft all the fighters you want. Like every 2-drop fighter, you can just draft all of them. So you just always have a turn 1 fighter, turn 2 fighter kind of play. Because I went 4-0 at my pre-release with Luke, and it was just because I opened a lot of turn 1 fighters. So he was really consistent for me.
Stan destroyed me with Luke.
Or like even
I wanted to flip the table.
or like even Vader, right? Because like I know I was watching Michael on Vader, and I was like, is this a Magic the Gathering board? Like, what am I looking at over here? There's like 8
Yeah.
units on
million
each side of the
tokens.
board, just staring at each other, and I'm just like, okay. So what do those look like when you don't have as much removal in the format? I think the most interesting thing is you see the mirror of design of like set 1, where it was like space was kind of like the evasive lane. You had like the Sabine Yellows of the world taking advantage of this, where they're like, oh, there's not a lot of ambush in space, there's not a lot of overwhelm in space, so like I'm gonna go space and like play my strategy around this. And now you see, in at least in limited, it's obvious where it's like, oh, space is the main lane, but then you have like this unassuming Captain Tarkin, or this unassuming like Admiral Yularen just like hanging out in the ground arena and supporting your space battle. So it's really fun to see the game design evolve and how that plays out.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I loved it.
I had real success with having ground sentinels and then going like full space otherwise, so that if my opponent did dodge me, I had like a roadblock for them. Specifically the yellow like 4-cost 5/3 sentinel on the ground, the tank, that thing overperformed for me. And then the card that I call Bunker Steve, which is just the 1-cost 2/1 that if you control a vehicle has sentinel. That guy saved me like in 3 different games. He was so sick.
And
so great.
I think
great
the puzzle of like deploying your pilot leader as a pilot is like so much more interesting in limited, because you don't have as much high powered removal. You don't have as much like it's a multi-step process of like building it up rather than like, okay, did I sneak it in there anyway?
Yeah, like they're not guaranteed to put 3 Fang Fighters in their red deck, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're not hoping to draw Falcons so that they can, play Falcon and then you flip.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So another thing coming out with this release was Carbonite packs. Did you guys get Carbonite packs?
Oh yeah, baby. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Carbonite. Dude, I don't know if I can go back to regular packs. The hype of the Carbonite packs were so insane. For those who don't know, I've been in Alabama this whole weekend hanging out with Frank, who's graciously hosted me at his place. And we did a bunch of pre-releases together, and he bought a lot of Carbonite, and we opened a lot of Carbonite. It was crazy. He opened like 6 showcases and a serialized card. Like, it was nuts.
What serialized did he end up getting?
So he got Krennic's landing shuttle, the ST-149, which was awesome.
That one looks cool.
That one,
the prestige on that one looks really good.
Yeah, with the foiling and like the rain and the lightning in the background really pop. It's crazy. Yeah, that was a sick one to hit.
And
George,
then, I got the serialized Ghost number 54.
Hell yeah! Oh, that's a good number. Really low.
Whoop. So, yep. And then I got myself a little showcase Darth Vader.
Oh yeah.
So.
Very nice.
I opened 2 packs. One that I just bought because I was like, all right, let me just buy one. And then my second pre-release event, everyone in the top gate got a Carbonite pack.
What? That's so much better than regular packs. What? That's so sick.
It was so cool, yeah. And no, we also got our pack per win. So I got 4 packs and a Carbonite.
Very cool.
Oh, I just remembered. So I bought a case, and the third round of the pre-release, it was me and Michael. Michael was just like, when I opened Carbonite, he's like, yeah, okay, I can see. Good times.
He conceded to your prowess of how many Carbonite packs you needed to open there.
Oh, that man's a pack breaking fiend. So he's like he loves that. I'm sitting here like opening it, just like not even recognizing some of these cards as legendaries. I'm like, oh, okay. I was looking looking for like showcases and like cool prestige cards. And he's like, George, that's a legendary. I'm like, oh. I've never played that, but okay, cool. I should set that aside.
Throwing the foils to the side, no matter what it is. Yeah, whatever. Let me get to the good stuff.
So I opened a case as well. I did not have as much luck as you. I did get one very cool card, which is Grand Admiral Thrawn Showcase. This is my favorite showcase because he's my favorite character in Star Wars. So I was happy I opened him. But I didn't open the serialized cards in my case, so unlucky.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'm kind of on the other side of Carbonite. I don't get excited about it. I'm not like... I like my hyperspace cards in my deck, but I don't need everything to be shiny. I don't need a number to be stamped on the cards that I'm playing. And, like, regular cards win tournaments. It's kind of like how I am. I'm like, look, man, I can show up with a regular card and I can still win. So I don't really need it.
On the flip side, foil cards sometimes lose you tournaments. So if we're talking about getting that competitive edge,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of playing with foil cards, I did a Carbonite sealed with Loopy from Late Night Gaming on his channel. I think it was either last night or the night before. I forget when. I think it was last night. But that was a lot of fun. And the first time, so we did it twice. The first pack of 6 cards, I did it with Frank, and Frank opened, it was his cards. He opened a Showcase Vader, so we played with the Showcase Vader as our deck, even though we didn't really have a good amount of support for him, just because like we had to play with the Showcase.
Sure.
Yeah. And then we did another one where I used my own cards, and I opened nothing really great, but I had an insane Asajj yellow deck, and kicked Loopy's butt. But he destroyed me in what he opened. He opened, in his 6 packs for the second one, a serialized gold leader and a showcase Piet.
Nice.
In 6 packs.
You gotta play where each of you show up with a box of Carbonite. You build a sealed deck. You play. The winner gets to keep all the cards.
Oh,
that's Nancy. Oh boy.
Yeah, that's the most legendary gambling I've had. That's something for Vegas. We do that in Vegas.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Well, look. So this week we also had a ban announcement. Were you guys dialed in as that was going out?
Definitely. I mean, everybody knew that if there was something that was going to happen, it was probably going to be about Han, just because he had the most success at the PQ season for set 3. Luckily for Han enjoyers, the update was no bans, no further suspensions and no unsuspensions. So Boba stays in Carbonite, but Han does not join him, even though it would be pretty on point, just in terms of flavor.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I don't know. How do you guys feel about it?
Right?
So I had been testing up to this point with the assumption that DJ was getting banned. So it's a little... it caught me off guard. I was just like, for me, like the developers know like the problem with DJ, and they put it into Lando's text. So
yeah.
I was just like, oh, surely it's gotten to the point where it's popular enough that they have to, like, realize this is a problem affecting their game, and the stealing of resources and destroying them is just like,
even just from the unfun standpoint, right?
Yeah. It's
that was my
game-breaking,
take on it too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right before that announcement, we had errata was posted for the first time, it was all clarifications, except in one case it did change the gameplay a little bit. I think that was like the walker that does damage and then damages a ground unit or something. Like all the errata.
No, you're talking about the Blizzard AT-AT where it's like,
yeah.
You have to choose between like.
But everything else was just. Yeah, everything else was just. Let's clarify how these things work. So the errata was more like, let's answer open questions. So I didn't see anything related to Han there. And then the comprehensive rules were posted. I didn't see anything related to destroying resources, defeating resources that you don't control, or anything like that. And I was like, either it's a full ban or it's nothing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, even though I am a Han enjoyer, and I guess George had joined the light side and become a Han enjoyer.
I'm a smuggle addict. What can I say? he's a real good smuggler.
yeah, exactly. And it was just, even though I play Han all the time, I was like, something needs to be done. Because the other problem that I have with Han, like I personally think they should have just banned him for their own sake, because I think he puts them in a pickle in terms of designing future cards for the next 2 sets, because of both the 3 resource cost and the 7 resource cost. Because those are the 2 highlight points for Han as a leader, is that you can play a turn 1 3-drop and a turn 7 or a 7-drop on the 5 resource turn. And those are the 2 inflection points that I think they have to design cards around in his colors, because of how broken it can be. So I thought it would just be an easier thing. I mean, maybe they just don't want to have to ban something every set, but I don't know. I do think that this set will have a lot of changes, but at the same time, like, yeah, I don't know.
So I think they've, as the card pool expands, my counterpoint to that is like we have cards like, now there are two of them, triple dark grade. Like they've made it kind of clear that a card is worth about 2 resources. Like as far as like you playing a card gets you about 2 resources worth of cheating, right? Whether it's they hate that ship, whether it's
Sure, yeah.
there's other hoops you have to jump through for each of these cards, whether it's the trait restriction or giving your opponent units for they hate that ship, for example.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
it
even
seems
you're
like,
my only hope, also, unless you
yeah.
have 5 health left or whatever.
So like the designers are comfortable with that design space of a card giving you 2 resources. So that's basically what Han does with his flip. It just
Yeah.
is comically more consistent. So and not lucky tricks, you know. So like you know I'm intrigued as the card pool grows. You know, as we get more cards in that vein of play this, get a 2 resource discount. Whether we still feel that way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I haven't thought about it like that in terms of like the value of putting the card down and like how much they're comfortable giving us in terms of resource cheating. But you're right; it has consistently been 2. And even if you look at Piet, that's also 2. If you look at Boba Leader, who's suspended, that was also 2. So that's interesting.
It's actually funny. I was talking with Tyler Parrott back at Gen Con, and he's like, I can't even remember. I think it was some Hondo interaction, but he's just like, it always comes down to 2. And I was like, all right, that's the thing. You know, it's a fun little bit of foreshadowing, but here we are.
Wow. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, you know, I was talking about just kind of how bad it feels to get Bozo comboed and to get your resource stolen and defeated. I'm interested to know like how much they care about things like that, not just the competitive aspect, but just people's feelings when they play the game, because it is a game.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's interesting. It's an interesting take, and they decided to do nothing, which to me it means they think the format is going to evolve in a way where it's not going to be as oppressive.
Yeah,
we're going to be able to handle it. There's going to be other problems.
Well, there's definitely going to be other problems.
There's problems.
comes to my next point on the agenda, which is Ian's hot take, which maybe we'll have this as a future segment where I do this every week. But my main problem that I have right now, and my hot take is kind of going off of the ban stuff. I think that they purposely didn't ban Han because they realize how busted Jango is going to be, and Jango is going to be so busted that the only way to like solve the Jango meta is that you have to play like really hard control, fatigue-ish type decks, and the only way to keep those decks in check is to leave DJ be, so that there's like this triangle meta of these control fatigue decks beating Jango because they don't play events for them to bazooka down your board, and then the Han decks beat the control decks, even though the Jango deck beats the Han deck. That is my hot take of why I think that the bans happened the way they did, is because they actually looked forward into the meta. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense why TDR wasn't preemptively banned or something. Because all the things that Jango got with this set, he is going to be a massive problem.
He is a monster. Do we think he's bad enough to be next? What do we think is going to happen in this season with Jango?
I hope that the player base can adapt. I know George is one of his favorite things to do is seeing a meta that people think has been established and then going in and wrecking it like the Hulk. So, I mean, I think that the player base definitely has the like skill level and ability to break a meta like that. I don't know if it'll be fun in the meantime. My expectation is that the first couple tournaments, people aren't going to be teched out to beat Jango enough, or they're going to be too teched out to beat Jango, that maybe they've improved their matchup to be like a 45, 60, or 55, but they've just made their deck so much worse against all the random stuff that people will play, that they end up like losing to the non-Jango decks too. I don't know. What do you think, George?
Yeah, I mean, I do really like the take of like they didn't ban DJ because it gives, you know, a solid value. It is good versus like fatigue and control type strategies, right? I like that take. Do I think the meta is doomed to be a rock paper scissors setup? I don't buy that. I think there's play around shields. I think there's plays around discard strategies. Like there's the design space of this game. I think is better than that. Um, I I am a little astonished that they got IG 2000 and War Juggernaut. Like I thought
Yeah.
one of them seems right, but like mostly War Juggernaut is like a real head scratcher. Like
Yeah. Yep.
He just fires a little pot shot at your Imperial ship out in space, and it like turns sideways.
yeah, it hits space units, and then like it can even target your own units to make it more powerful. Like it's so
Yeah.
like okay.
Getting
Like-
more powerful off of friendly fire, that's just like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's
FFG
bizarre theming and bizarre design, but like that's the game. That's the game. It's where we're at. So
I have a feeling he was designed specifically for the limited format, and maybe they just didn't realize what they did with. Maybe they because like TDR has historically always been getting out space units, and maybe they just like forgot that it's a vehicle on the ground.
Well, they said that about Steadfast Battalion. They said, "Whoa, we thought this was a limited staple. We had no idea you guys were going to jam these in your decks."
Wait,
We're like,
really? I never knew that story.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Yep.
Like, well, they said that. They're like, well, ECL lets it kill leaders. If my leader flips on 5 and I can ECL a Steadfast, that's amazing. And they didn't realize it was going to be so prevalent in Premier.
Wow.
So it's possible.
Hey,
It's possible.
I heard the counter to Jango just kill him. So boom.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of spoiled it. They ruined that
Oh.
process that we would have of exploring the meta and finding the solution on our own.
Obviously.
I think that's something they try to avoid, but this time they just told us.
I
Kill
do,
Jango.
yeah. So if people don't know what we're referring to, on the live stream at the ban updates, I had asked in chat multiple times, and they finally answered, like, how do they feel about unit-based decks versus Jango, who now has like 6 to 9 copies of essentially a full board tapper unit between IG 2000, War Juggernaut, and Devastator. And their answer to that was that they think that Jango has enough playability or anti-playability, like you can play into Jango enough where you can just kill Jango and solve that problem. Which, if anybody's played against that, he's got 7 health. That's really hard to kill, especially on 5 resources. So,
And he taps your units.
and he taps your units to make them not hit him.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So
it's
we'll
gonna
see.
be
I mean,
it's gonna
we'll
be
see.
a process of like figuring out whether your color or your archetype wants to go tall and like try and like deal a bunch of damage before you can exhaust it by like manipulating initiative, or whether it's like going like just wide enough to like where he has to keep his Jango alive and he has to claim losing out value, because like the fundamental thing about Jango is like it's a negative value proposition, right? It's exhaust. We've had other exhaust strategies that have never really taken off because whether it was Thrawn or like the whole bounty hunter thing.
Mandalorian's
another exhaust strategy that never really caught on, because like negative value isn't winning you the game; it's just winning you the race.
Yeah.
Which blah blah blah, tempo versus value. But yeah, we're at the point where it's like, okay, if you just stack up one unit, are we just like going ham with one unit? Like you just have to claim and not attack me ever because you're scared of it? It's an interesting play pattern, but yeah.
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 I mean, the games do get intricate. I don't want to like downplay that. There are some like really fun play lines from both sides, no matter like what strategy you are. It's just when the Jango deck high rolls, it just feels like literally unbeatable. Like no matter what you did, you didn't have a chance. So
Yeah.
And
I agree with that. The high rolls are crazy, but I do enjoy my games with Jango. I don't know if there's something wrong with me, but
you
it is
sick
kind of like
person.
fun. Yeah, like figuring out how to work around it.
yeah, no, I get that. I get that. I mean, it's a challenge too, because if you go
Yeah.
into it knowing it's like a good deck and like maybe the like top deck to beat, then it's fun trying to like solve that puzzle, right?
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of like the like it's Jango's turn 4 is like you're just hoping for TDR most of the time. The other turn 4s are pretty mid. Like, yeah,
I mean, you can just play IG
I don't
on
have
turn 4.
yeah, like that's fine. Yeah. Anyway,
It's good against the
not
aggro
my
decks.
style of deck. Sorry, that's how
don't-
I should phrase it. That's how I
Yeah, we're not here to figure out Jango. Let's see. So pre-releases, Carbonite packs, ban announcement. That's kind of what's been happening this week. But we also got the rules update. We got the full comprehensive rules. You know, we've been living off tweets or X posts. I honestly don't know what to call it. But now we have the actual full rules. So, you know, maybe each of us could like go into some things that we thought were interesting for competitive players from that update.
Yeah, one of the new changes just to the rules generally is that you are now allowed to, if you have multiple units or cards that have cost reduction applying to you paying cost to play a card, you can apply them in whichever order you want, which means that if you have something that's multiplicative and something that's additive, you can do it in the orientation and make it cost the least amount. A good example of this is the Starhawk, which is a new card that once it's out in the field or on the arena, you can all of the cost of things are reduced by half, rounded up. So when you have that out and then you play a home one lets you play a card from your discard pile for 3 less, but you can reduce the cost of the card by half before you apply the -3, which lets you take a 6 cost card, reduce it by half to make it 3, and then you pay 3 less, and it essentially costs 0. Otherwise, if you weren't able to stack it, you would have to do the -3 first, which would go from 6 to 3, and then you would half the 3 down to 1 or 2 because you have to round up. So that's super interesting. I know Justin from KTOD put the Starhawk in one of his videos as like a challenge to the community of, hey, let's break this card. It seems like a really fun build around, and I definitely agree with him that there's something there. Maybe we don't have the tools yet, but it definitely seems like a really crazy card if you can get it off.
And did this matter last set? Because now we have this multiplicative reduction. Did we have that before?
I don't think there was.
Yeah, maybe that's why we got this rule.
Yeah, I think it was.
I mean, it's like
specifically for
Jabba,
Starhawk.
right? He's the one I can think of off the top of my head that has similar.
It's still like a static.
I mean, obviously, Moff Gideon's cruiser is just on one with villain cards.
Yeah, all of them were like a discrete amount.
Yeah, like
Previously,
reduced by
right.
X, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Okay. Yeah, I think for me, just, you know, making sure players know how indirect damage works. You know, like, don't get surprised by someone having a shielded unit and they choose that unit to take the damage and they don't lose the shield, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if you send some indirect damage at your opponent, just be aware that that's something they can do. And if you're the one being targeted with indirect damage, you can't over damage one of your units. You know, maybe that's obvious, but don't let your opponents do that either. If there's only 2 health remaining, they can only assign 2 damage to it. Other parts that I thought were interesting, especially coming into this new set, is the clarifications and rules changes around controlling upgrades. Like in most games that I've ever played, if you attach something to a card that someone else owns, you're the one that owns that upgrade. So if I put entrenched on my opponent's unit, I control entrenched. They still control their unit. And then, so in the rules, they've just clarified if you take control of a unit that has upgrades, it doesn't change control of the upgrade. So an example is Poe, the leader Poe. When you deploy him as an upgrade, he has an ability to pay 1 to move him to another eligible unit. Right, so if someone takes control of your unit that has Poe on it, you can still move Poe over to one of your own vehicles after they've taken control of it.
I like that change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or clarification, I guess, really.
Yeah, I think in some of these cases, these clarifications are like, well, we had never explicitly written it in the rules.
Right.
We were playing that way, and the judge community has to make some of these calls, right? Like they talk a lot in their Discord, and I've been at tournaments where judges are like calling each other, like, or posting on the Discord like, "Hey, my players have this situation. I'm gonna handle it like this. You guys agree?" And they're like, "Yeah, just do it that way." So some of these rules are like, "This is how we've been playing. Now it's in the rules."
Yeah, it makes sense.
What about you, George? You got any that you like or dislike?
I mean, I'm heartbroken, devastated, crushed, infuriated, mad, sad, all the above with the news of Hondo, and the interaction with timely intervention. So, basically, they're making it so that when you timely intervention, you have to all the effects on the card become nested triggers, which because Hondo was a separate card. So the way that interaction used to work was you would play when timely intervention, and then all the win plays would be, basically go on to resolve how you want them. So like Hondo was a win played, Ambush was a win played, like Shielded, for example, was a win played, and you would stack those whichever way is the most beneficial to you. And this actually goes back to set one. The reason I fell in love with this game, the reason I started taking this game seriously, was the interaction I saw, and it's kind of funny to look back on it, with actually Piet, the 2-cost one, and then Count Dooku. Because I realized the Count Dooku unit, this very simple text of shielded and defeat a unit that has 4 or less health, depending on what units your opponent had, giving that unit ambush made so you could resolve it in like 7 different ways, right? Like you could do shield first, run into a 9 health unit, and then finish it off with Dooku. You could like use the wind played to defeat like a Sentinel or something, and then hit something, and then put the shield on. Or you could do that with putting the shield on first. Like all of those kinds of options and how it interacts with all these different various board states. That's when I was like, there's something cooking with this game. And that was one of the reasons I loved Hondo. It's not the end of the world. Like you still get the Hondo trigger. It just happens after you have to do it after ambush. Like a really common play pattern, and I think the biggest one that hurts is the 7/7 Childson. So one of the clean answers to like Jango and like Boba in the last meta was like they do their flip turn, and then first action of the 6/3 source turn, you just timely intervention Childson as a 7/7 ambush, kill their leader, and now you have this giant Sentinel protecting your Hondo. But now because you have to do the win plays from the card first, which includes ambush, and you have to do the Hondo after the ambush, he only will ever ambush the 6/6.
So like client can still hit and then put on a shield, but it can't do that with experience.
It can't be a 3. Yeah, it can't be a 3 attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Han gets away scot-free, but Hondo gets the crossfire.
Why?
I know.
What problem did they solve? But what problem did they solve with this rule change?
I think it's.
Do you know?
I think it's U-wing shenanigans is my guess. Like.
Interesting.
Yeah, because there's a lot of weird stuff when you start talking about when stuff gains ambush, when you're playing stuff.
So is it basically just changing how things that give ambush or ambush itself?
No, it's when you play a unit. It's now everything's when you play a unit from another card, all the effects on that card are now nested triggers. I believe is the exact wording. Do you actually?
Okay.
You have the exact wording, right?
Yeah. So like timely intervention gives the unit ambush, right?
Yeah. It gives the unit. You play it, and like. In the old rules, it made sense because specifically on the wording of timely intervention, it says gives ambush until the end of phase, right? Implying like, oh, there's some timing stuff there, but
so it's the leader ability that we can't use.
It's the fact that it's a different card.
Triggered.
You have to trigger the effects of the card that you're playing when you play with a different card.
And part of timely intervention is playing the unit. giving an ambush, so you have to fully play the unit.
Okay, hold on.
It
So George, if I U-winged and I had like a fleet lieutenant and I don't know some rebel that ambushed, would I be able to wing leader? Wing leader, yeah.
leader.
Would I still be able to wing leader it before ambush, or would I have to like ambush first or something?
I'm not a judge.
You specifically play the units
one at a time.
one after the other.
Yeah.
One at a time.
But that means that you have to play the ambusher before you play the wing leader. So if you have to play the ambusher first, there's still a when played that happens, which means I think you have to do the ambush, and then you would be able to wing leader after it.
So like,
man, I hope not. We need to figure this out. I hope that's not how it works.
yeah, I'm devastated, but oh well. Hondo Yellow, here we go.
Yeah. I don't know if there is any ambushing rebels, so I don't know if that actually comes up, but that was like a thing I thought about.
I mean, all
I'll try to figure this out.
Rebels with Wedge.
Oh, that is true.
And it's U-wing reinforcements, so, you know.
Yeah.
I'll try to edit it in the answer. Afterwards.
Yeah, we'll figure that one out.
Into the bio.
Yeah. We'll get an answer.
I'll put it on screen. Like, here's these idiots couldn't figure it out. Here's what it is.
I don't play these heroes and cards. What are you talking about?
I mean, I played a lot of U-wing, but that's something that hasn't come up for me.
George, you want to talk about Kaz real quick?
Yeah, the ability to lose all abilities, losing abilities is now officially loses all abilities and cannot gain those abilities. Kaz has the text of, losing whatever ability they have. So, it has cool interactions with like blanking bounties, whether it's like units that you have with bounties, like Cartel's Turncoat or Clone Deserter or whatever. It works with like events like Trench Run and Heroic Sacrifice. So,
yep.
A lot of really cool interactions there. You've got, you have cards like Gamorrean Guard or whatever, right? The whole example they gave was Spec Force Soldier with Gamma Guard, right? That doesn't matter if you like play another command unit, or if you didn't have a command unit first and then like played it later. Like they're just cleaning that up to say nope, none of that.
I think Jonathan had mentioned like if you have a Emperor's Royal Guards out that there's no official in play and it doesn't have Sentinel right now, if like the Sabine opponent Spec Force Soldiers, the Royal Guard, and then the Palpatine player plays the official afterward, the Emperor's Royal Guard wouldn't gain Sentinel because even though the Sentinel wasn't removed at the first point, it no longer can gain Sentinel for the rest of that turn.
It's not terribly intuitive. And they said on their latest stream that they don't want to change these paper cards, the way that they read and what they mean, when they talked about like irradiating Han. People were asking about that. But to me, this is one of those times where things that say, it says loses Sentinel. Well, now that actually means loses and cannot gain.
Right.
Which I think for competitive players, this is one of those instances where you want to know how that works.
Yeah, because in that scenario, the only thing that actually matters is the cannot gain part. The loses part didn't even come up.
Right. It didn't have it yet. Yeah. But now it cannot gain it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Super interesting. I guess it does give a small buff to cards that do stuff like that, but
yeah, it's an interesting design space. Force Lightning is still it's in my binder waiting for that Force set that's about to come out in 3 months or whatever, 4 months. So, I mean, loses abilities is it's super exciting to see now that they have that set in stone and people are like comfortable with it. Okay, what are they planning on doing with it, right?
Yeah.
Even Kaz, even that ability, like in the cards he got with this set, it's super interesting to think about what those cards are actually worth, what the downside is, how many resources is like the silence effect work. A lot of interesting math there, but Like
it is that you have it every turn.
Well, like a fun little thought
interesting
experiment, right?
too.
Like, how much would you pay for Trench Run? Like, ignore the fact that it costs 1, right? And let's say like you're ignoring the downside. Like, how many resources would you pay for +4 damage attack with a fighter unit?
Yeah.
I think that's like
for surprise
two
strike.
or 3. I guess 2 maybe because it's like 1 more than surprise strike, but it's trait locked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, my gut would be like 2. So it's like,
Yeah.
give it because it's trait locked, right? So like then your Kaz ability is worth about 1 resource. It's interesting. Anyway.
And it's worth 1 resource with the Falcon.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Super
Something to
interesting.
point out there, it is abilities that they actually have or have gained, etc. So like the entrenched upgrade on entrenched says that the upgraded unit cannot attack bases.
Right.
So
yeah. It doesn't give
that
the
Kaz won't take that away.
Yeah, because it doesn't give the unit an ability. It's just the upgrade is doing all the magic there.
Yep.
Yep. So that's something to note when you're looking at these loses and cannot gain abilities, etc.
Yeah.
Pay attention to whether it really is giving it an ability that's going to go away or not.
I wonder if in future sets they're going to sprinkle out some more like cards that have downsides but extra stats type of stuff, like the stolen AT hauler, just sprinkled throughout, just to like give Kaz a couple more toys to play with. It reminds me a lot of I played a lot of Hearthstone in my card game career, and it reminds me a lot of Silence Priest, if anybody's played that.
Yep.
There was actually like a meme at one point like that. It wasn't like a competitively viable deck. It was just like they had these units that were super high statted but couldn't attack, and then there was people trying to make priest silence effects put on their own unit so that their unit can now attack, and it's like a giant unit above rate. And then I think the developers saw people like playing around with that and thought it was like a fun thing, so then they started giving them more and more tools until it actually became a competitively viable deck for a while in Hearthstone, which is cool. So I wonder if that's what this is going to end up being too. Like, even if Kaz isn't all the way there this set, if they sprinkle a couple more, like how many more cards does it take, like on the power level of a Falcon or an AT Hauler or Trench Run to get him to be like at the tier 0 or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It'd be interesting
and with the heroism villainy aspect of this game, with Kaz being a heroism leader, does that mean we're going to see more of those effects on heroism cards than villainy cards?
True.
I think the expectation I have at this point is like we see more of the traits getting filled out, right? Like I feel like the traits have been pretty not set in stone, but like pretty established with year 1. Whether it's rebel, separatist, vehicle, fighter, transport, all this sort of stuff. So
Underworld,
Underworld. Yeah, we keep seeing more supports for the traits, but not so much for like keywords and exact lines, right? It's not like we're not going to see more smuggle more than likely. I don't expect to see more pilots, but we're going to see more vehicles that and more fighters that might fit that niche. 1-cost fighters, to do cool Boshek stuff,
Or even
so
just help Luke.
No more smuggle at all.
Oh man, trust me, it hurts, but you gotta come to terms.
Yeah, where's the bounties? Where's the smuggle? Come on, bring some back.
Smuggle's the best.
Yeah, that would be crazy if they were just like, all right, we're adding 5 bounties to the set for some random reason. It's just like boss gets a huge upgrade.
Well, the counterpoint to that is they did bring back capture twice, right? Like they brought capture.
That is true.
back
Yeah,
to
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we can see it.
Twilight.
Still didn't help Jabba, but
Hey, Cad Bane's real. Cad Bane's very, very real.
that
Cad
card's
Bane
good.
unit.
I agree.
Yeah.
That card's really good.
So
Cool.
let's jump into our main segment. The reason we brought George here, not just to hang out with George. We love hanging out with George.
So, we'll hang out with you too.
To talk about deck building. George, you I think you like to call yourself a deck doctor. Like, what term do you like to use?
Oh, deck doctor's great. Yeah, absolutely. Like
Yeah.
people make appointments. I do the checkup. I'm like, all right, you got your turn 1 plays, you got your turn 2 plays. Go down the checklist. Yeah, make sure all their vitals
check
are
the
good.
blood pressure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Temperature.
That's the Doctor Banner to his George the Hulk.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. I'm Dr. Banner in the Discord. And I go to tournaments. I'm the Hulk. Yeah, exactly.
So we're gonna get into deck building in a new environment. Set 4 just came out. How do you approach a new set coming out? How do you assess new game pieces? What's your approach there?
Yeah, so I will say, like, the common approach and what card gamers are like instinctively trained to do is they see a new card and they're like, oh, okay, this has synergy with this card. There's this planetary bombardment, and I want to have, and so what does that synergize with? Oh, it synergizes with 5-cost capital ships, so I can do 5-cost capital ship into planetary bombardment. What kind of deck wants that? Or, it also synergizes with, like, Devastator, because now I can direct all that damage exactly how I want it to be, whether it's a board wipe or directly to the face, depending on tempo. So, like, that's kind of like the knee-jerk reaction. And generally, that's a part of it, but that's kind of leads you down this rabbit hole that, like, I've had this conversation many, many times where people are like, oh, I have this deck idea, it does this thing, and then, like, 5 minutes later, it's a completely different color combination, a completely different leader, and, like, a completely different deck with, like, one of the cards left. Because that's how Star Wars Limited, like all the cards are so interconnected that people get excited about talking about certain things, and then they just go completely off the rails. So, I break my process comes down to, like, number one, obviously, what's the goal? Why am I building the pile of cards I'm going to? Is it, a sort of late game sequence where it's like, oh, I want to Super Laser Blast Avenger in, like, set 1, or is it like an early game sequence where I want to turn 1 vehicle into pilot? And then how is that impacting the rest of the game? And then I basically break down, like, regardless of draw sequence, like, what is the optimal line for this deck? Like, if I could stack my deck, what does that look like? And, like, what are the numbers on that? Like, what synergies am I putting together? How does that work with my flip turn? And, like, what is the ceiling of what this deck can do? And, for example, let's say you're doing malevolent stuff. Let's say you're doing, like, I don't know, Piet. Why not? And you're thinking, like, oh, okay, well, maybe I want to set up a flip turn where I play Malevolence. What does that look like? Oh, well, maybe it's too action intensive because you have to flip Piet and then have units, and there's too many pieces there. Maybe you decide against that. Oh, well, rewind a few turns. What does that look like if you have a turn 1 token producer? Like, we've had droid deployment in the past, but now we also have Kijimi patrol fighters. So now you start, like, going down this, like, oh, well, my optimal line is create 2 tokens turn 1, do this turn 2, do this turn 3, do this turn, do this turn 4. Oh, now my flip turn, looks like this. Well, you might not have that exact line, but once you identify that optimal line, you can start finding cards that fill the same roles.
Right. So, like, in the case of like some interaction that your opponent has, or a discard effect, you have, like, basically, like, here's plan A, here's plan B.
Yeah, like, you're not gonna have Bodhi, you're not gonna have Spark Rebellion and Bodhi Rook every game, but, like,
Sure, yeah.
Maybe you're leaning on that discard effect and you do Bodhi Rook into Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Like, maybe and maybe you're fine with that. But yeah, that's the next step, and so that's the first step, is finding, like, the optimal line. Then I'll look at, like, the core line, right? Like, oh, okay, I can't draw this exact sequence every game, obviously. What cards function similarly to that? And there's actually a concept called the perfect curve, and I'm sure we'll do a little visual of it, but it's basically given a certain number of cards drawn, what number of cards you need to have in your deck to be very consistent versus consistent. It's just a series of hypergeometric calculations where it's like, okay, if I have 15 turn 2 plays, I have a 95% chance of seeing one of them. So that means in a typical line where I'm using all of my resources efficiently, I need to have about 5 different cards or so. And then going up the curve. How many 4-drops do you need? How many 3-drop? You know.
You mean with mulligans, right? 15?
You're talking about that's turn 1. We'll have all the exact numbers up there, but I break it all down. It's a big long sheet.
Yeah, I mean the reason we don't have visuals as we're talking is because this is also an audio only podcast.
Oh
so,
yeah.
So for people that are listening.
So I actually have my document where I actually literally write all this down. So.
Yeah, I mean, for people watching on YouTube or even on Spotify, you can watch the video version. But
see, my form of
audio listeners.
My form of this is when people ask me how many cards that you have to run at 3 costs for C-3PO and Han, I just tell them a made up number every time. Sometimes it's 23, sometimes it's 21, sometimes it's 22. It always changes. There's no math behind it. It just feels and vibes. George actually does the math.
There is math.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Here's how this is an interesting little bit. I call the concept the perfect curve, where how many cards you need of a certain type to have 90. This is specifically 94% consistency. I'll get into that in a minute, but it's 18 2-drops, 13 3-drops, 11 4-drops, 10 5-drops, and 8 6-drops. So you can literally get to a stage of, planning out your sequences of if I'm using all of my resources on one card each turn, these are the branches of the lines that I could do. These are the possibilities in my deck. And the reason 94% consistency is a number is because that actually equals a 50 card deck. So you can get all of those, you can hit all those resource points with that curve. Well, the obvious thing is we have mulligans in this game. So you don't need to run 18 2-drops. So now you cut down to your 12s or your 13s, because now you have the ability to mulligan into your 2-drop. Well, now you have card slots for other cards, maybe an in-game piece, maybe an extra removal, maybe whatever, however you want to massage your ratio. And just for those who are delving into hypergeometric calculation, the way I like to think about it is 95% is very consistent. You'll hit that failure rate depending on what you're calculating, once or twice a tournament. This is generalizations. I know I'm not going to go into this in this podcast, but it's very consistent. 85%, fairly consistent. It'll happen. The failure will hit, once every 2 matches or so. Whatever.
But potentially twice in one match.
It depends. It depends on what it is, right? It depends on what the trigger is, right? If you're talking about what are my chances of C-3PO as an example, when you're attacking multiple turns in a row, 85% is literally just 1 in 6, right? Yeah. So.
Yeah, I would love for 85% chance to hit off C-3PO. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Chancellor? No, but that was for the audience. Anyway, so core line. So we have optimal line, core line, and then my next step is I actually have a checklist of where I go. Okay, I think Wu did a video about his benchmark things you need to do, and it's the idea of benchmarks, right? Can you consistently stop deck DJ? Can you answer a leader that's ramped into? If you're an aggro deck, can you stop Sentinels? Like it's just a checklist of like, I don't need to like play these games. Like literally just look at like my cards. What are my chances of drawing the answers, or just my responses to them?
So when new game pieces are coming out, are we applying that checklist? Are we like looking at it and saying, does this help us solve any of those problems we weren't able to solve before, etc.?
What adds more problems?
Yeah, and, I mean, there's more problems too. The checklist should grow. Tech didn't exist.
Oh,
forever.
absolutely. No, yeah, Tech didn't. Yeah, DJ didn't exist. Anakin TIE Phantom was a big one where like when we realized like Phantom is just a deck building puzzle. It's not a like as far as a game piece that the 2/2 raid 2 with like a cool ability like yeah, having the answer is way more important than actually executing on the answer. Does that make sense? Like, you need to have a 2/3 ship, or a negative 2 -2 effect, or a discard effect. Like, these kinds of things are things you have to plan about in deck building. Because if you're playing control deck, like in set 2 or whatever, and you didn't plan around it, you just lose.
Yeah.
Like, Super Laser Blast is worthless, Power Dark Side is worthless, blah, 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 blah. So, identifying those, that's some top secrets. No, whatever. It's not that hard to identify, like, what actual game mechanics could stop your game plan. And, yeah. So, that's the general process. Then, sorry, before that,
I'm trying to think like how a player, like a listener, someone listening, applies this to a new set coming out, set 4. Are they like going through exercises to try and identify the new problems that should be added to this checklist? Are they, what are they doing? How are they taking, the things we're talking about and applying them themselves?
Sure. So let's take I did this exercise recently. Let's talk about Vader 4. He's a fun one. So number one, what is your optimal line with this guy? Because a lot of your good decks, that's not fair. You have to be able to attack with a vehicle. That's your first piece of the puzzle. And obviously
with
a
Vader,
non-token vehicle, and you would do that as frequently as possible. But the more you do that, the less you're going to have initiative, making it so your opponent's able to respond to it. So how are you navigating this puzzle? The first obvious answer. That's the first obvious answer. Ambush. So how are we ambushing vehicles? It turns out on this exercise, there's 4 ambush vehicles, and they all cost 4 resources.
They do all cost 4. I actually knew that.
Yeah,
I looked that up once, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
Why do they all cost 4? I think they're all in
There's
different
two
colors,
costs.
right? Are they all in different colors, or are they two? There's Azatec. There's the new one from this set that's makes ties.
The new one's 2 costs.
There's one that makes ties. There's the Separatist one that makes droid token. There's the one from set 1, the escort skiff.
Escort skiff. Yeah.
Are you guys talking about space only?
No, I'm talking about ambush vehicles. There's
the 2 cost one.
Oh, okay.
Yellow.
That one was released. That one was released after I did this, actually. So, like, yes, that does exist. And then you have like the really expensive ones. I'm not counting those. I'm not talking about like Home One, or like Falcon. Like,
It does Marauder.
This is also Vader. Sorry.
Oh, but that's not villain, right?
The better stipulation is it needs to be villain for Vader to be taken.
For sure.
For villainy, for Vader Green, in set 4, it's like 4 cost ships, 4 cost vehicles. So what does that mean? Well, you probably don't want to ramp, because if you ramp, you're going from 3 to 5.
Oh, sure.
So that's a big anti-synergy.
It's also just like pretty tempo negative for the fact that you like kind of want to keep playing out more ships in case they deal with your other ships, right?
Yeah. If you spend a turn, playing a ramp card, and now your opponent has the ability to like answer your ships easier. Well, now you're not attacking. Now you have this spiral of like not doing anything and losing value from your front side, and then you end up being like, oh, I have no ships because my opponent was just playing control, and I guess I flip Vader as a ground unit.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the flip side, what if you build your ratios around, oh, I'm going to lean into these ambush vehicles, maybe even like timely intervention, maybe even like ECL. I don't know, but build around that, and then like, oh, you have these neat one-cost pilots that help fill in the cost curves, that help me do stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, putting them on your like 1/1s to make them a little bit stronger and beefier makes sense.
yep, make them stronger, make them survive. War juggernauts or whatever. Make them, you get your XP tokens or whatever, but also allow you to keep like this ambush sort of train going.
Okay, so this sounds like taking a new leader from a new set and trying to figure out, okay, what are my core? You talked about core lines and optimal lines. It seems like that's kind of, you're using that analysis tool here with a brand new leader, looking at like what tools enable those core lines.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're talking about like what a player could do at the beginning of a new set. I think that's like a pretty clean example.
Yeah. So like in terms of assessing leaders, when a new set's coming out, how are you deciding how much time to invest in going back and looking at previous leaders, maybe leaders that didn't work out, or leaders that we already know are good? How much better are they getting? Like, how do you balance that time out?
Are we about to spend the next 30 minutes talking about Chancellor?
Not 30 minutes. Not 30 minutes.
Okay. So that's a fantastic question. Because I think the biggest factor is really just what you want your deck to do. Like, I think it sounds boring, but it's just really that simple. Like, do you want to play a deck that's like, I'm gonna have this really solid early game where I'm answering all your units? Okay, maybe you want to like lean to like Quinlan or Cad because they have these pings that really change the math in the early game, and like pings are good late game, but they don't do that much. Or maybe you want something like, I mean, Jango's an obvious example right now. It's too easy. Han, like, maybe you want to be like, oh, well, there's this new 7-cost card.
Yeah.
When you put that in Han, how does that transform the deck?
Yeah, I mean, that's literally what I did in set 2. Was I saw that DJ was a 7-cost for specifically Han in mono yellow. That just like completely made him viable, right? So, yeah, for me, I think a lot of it's like how busted is the thing that got revealed, like the new support, versus how fun and interesting are the new leaders. Like for set 3 and for this set, the first things I did was just played with new leaders, just because it's always fun to play with new leaders. There's completely new lines. You're not just trying to optimize, because I feel like when you start going and just making like an old leader better, you almost get down. You like skip a step already, right? Because you already know that there's like an established, all right, well, it's at least this good, whether that's like tier 1, tier 2, whatever it is. And then you're just trying to optimize it to get above, like, to the next tier. Where when you're playing with a new leader, you might think, like, oh, this surely is going to be amazing. And then you play with it, and you're like, there's maybe not enough tools here. Or maybe I need to, like, just put this on the side and, wait for the next set to see if there's more stuff. Like, I think for me, I know a lot of people love him. I think Thrawn is that for me. Like, I played around with him a lot this set, and like in preview season and up to all of the latest reveals, and was really hyped because I love like the card. When a card says double, I'm in, like, no matter what. And doubling when defeated abilities is obviously super powerful. But for me, I think I'm gonna wait for him to see if other people can like kind of crack him, but 2, just see like when we get new sets with new when defeated, he's just going to keep getting better and keep getting better. So like, in 2 sets from now, he totally possible that he's the best leader in the game, right? Like,
Yeah, that's a lot like people being excited about Hera right now.
Yeah,
We just got a whole new shipment of specters to play with, and you see people having fun with it all over the place, and maybe there's something there. But yeah, I think when we talk about having old leaders that we've worked with, George and I, we took Chancellor Blue to SCG Con. We worked on it a lot going up to it, and it was fun and exciting. We loved the deck, and then first day of SCG Con, we both played it. Did not go well.
We had fun.
Yes, we did.
I think George had the most fun with his hoodie.
Oh yeah. I was bought in like a month before SCG Con. I was thinking about Chancellor. I had the itch, I had the bug, and I was like, I'm gonna do it because whenever that card got previewed, the first comment was just like, "There's a lot going on with this card. We're gonna wait till the deck builders break it," And I was like,
exactly.
And I was like, all right, I've been summoned, and and I spent like a solid month on that deck. And like the thing is, like the card pool is insane, right? If you want to build the best discard deck in the game, you can grab the best heroism and villainy discard pieces and do that. If you want to build the best late game deck in the game, you can do that. Grab the best villainy and the best heroic cards. Like, do it. The problem is, especially at SCG Con, that meta was so diverse. Like,
it really was. Yeah.
It was a very open field, and like trying to hit all the ratios you need for Chancellor, which is like you need early heroism units, you need like enough cheap villainy stuff that you can play whether you flip on turn 2 or turn 3 or later. Hopefully not, but like you need to hit all these certain ratios to make this like engine function while still being competitive, and then you do that all at the same time of responding to DJs and Sabines and Anagins and everything else. So, I ended up with a version that was like leaning on C3PO and a bunch of 2-costs to act as this huge card advantage engine to like smooth out the turn cycles. That way you could like always have something to play no matter which side you were on, and
also just always have like a heroic unit so that you could always flip back to villainy, right? Because that was always the hard part for me with that deck, was like if they bounced your token when you made it, or like they didn't claim yet and you want to activate him to flip him and make the token. If they interact with that token, then it's really hard to flip back the next time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's a lot of posturing.
But going wide gives you that like that protection of like, okay, we're gonna have something,
Yeah.
Sentinels also play a role there where you're blocking, protecting them. But we got a new fun 35 health base that loses you a card, but Chancellor has cards for days. So maybe maybe you take that as a starting point and just run with it, see where that goes. So
I think that's like an example of we put a lot of time into a deck and it did not work out. We lost. We had fun. But ultimately, we lost. And that's not really, like, we're trying to have fun, but we're also trying to win. I think at the time, I had said, I learned once again that I have fun when I'm winning. not just when I'm having fun. When I'm having fun and winning, that's fun for me. But we learned so much. So, like, I think something like people that have invested a lot of time into their pet leaders or a package or like a strategy or approach in this game that they do enjoy, but it just didn't quite work out in previous sets. What would you suggest to those people on some strategies they can use when new sets come out and they want to like reassess something that they've already invested a lot of time into?
So I heard like two very different questions there. So I'm going to answer. I'm going to answer both. So what I heard was, you have players who've invested a whole bunch of time into a specific strategy. When I hear that, I think of players like, Sabine players and all the,
Well, okay, a failed strategy. I'll qualify it a little bit. something that they loved and never quite worked out. And as new sets come out, they want to reassess it.
Oh, okay.
I think a good
so,
example
so
of that's like friend of the podcast, friend of the Bothan network, Crispy with his Fennec deck. Like that leader gets new ambush cards all the time, right? Like, something like that, I would assume, is what you're going about, Jonathan. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So the in order to approach that, like, my response to that is I don't believe in sacred cows. So that's a phrase used in deck building of, like, also referred to as staples. Like, if you have this deck building restriction, you always put this card in, no matter what, right? Like, if you are command villainy, you always run Overwhelming Barrage. Well, maybe your deck has a lot of small dudes. Maybe you're running a bunch of droids, and you're like, what am I going to OB for? 3 damage? Like, maybe you're running a bunch of, like, token producers or pilots and, like, TIE fighters. We're going to OB on, you know?
Or your leader doesn't flip to a lot of power.
Yeah. So, that's my first suggestion is understand the cards that are above rate. Yes, OB is an absurdly above rate, but it needs synergy. It needs a fat unit stick on the board. It needs, that leader flip into OB, or an above rate 4-cost unit to go right into your OB. So understand, if you're trying to do something and revisit something with new cards, what you considered sacred cows, actually think about how they work in the context of your deck.
Okay. So like, fight against previous bias, or like try to reset your bias, maybe.
Oh yeah,
maybe it's part of what you're getting at.
I think it's a huge part of it.
Bias a little bit.
Like, let's say, I think it's great with Hondo. I think it's a perfect example. I had a lot of success in Hondo against, like, Boba, right? Again, in the set 2 metagame, that leader, green, black, blue, treated me really, really well at a lot of different events. And a large part of that was the staple green, black, blue metagame was play removal, play Vaders, play Star Destroyers. And that was, like, the formula. And I didn't play Vader. I played Maul. I didn't play Star Destroyers, so I played Avenger. But I mostly just played Smuggle plus a removal. And, I had this different vision for what my end game looked like. I had this different vision for my early game looked like. And the snowballing of XP counters. So threw away all of the green, black, blue sacred cows. Obviously kept some of them. Like, I ran 2 OBs on 3 in the sideboard. I still had Super Laser Blast, just not, 3 of them main or whatever. Avenger was in the side. So took out all of those biases and said, what do I want my deck to do? I want my deck to have a hand that is full of removal, and I want my resource row to be full of threats. That way, if you ever try to, do something, threatening and it's above rate, I have my hand to answer it. And if you ever do something below rate or not that threatening, I have my resource row to apply pressure.
Yeah, that's interesting. That also kind of ties into our last episode's topic of, like, rogue deck building and, like, playing off meta, sometimes cards, in order to, like, kind of catch your opponent off guard. Because I'm sure there's been times where, like, you could posture with your Hondo deck like you were going to Overwhelming Barrage them or something, and you just didn't have it, right? But your opponent is assuming that, you're playing green-black villainy, you must have a Overwhelming Barrage, and then they make, like, a suboptimal attack, right? Which, like, gives you a bunch of percentage points in a matchup. Or they just, like, misevaluate the game plan that you're trying to enact because they're used to playing against, like, a Krennic deck or a Kira deck, which the Hondo plays way different than both of those.
Or Iden back in the day, for sure. Yeah, Hondo. There was such a huge rogue deck advantage with Hondo specifically, and, like, Fennec does a similar thing. You just mentioned that. So, rogue deck advantage, like, is very real.
It's almost the inverse of adding rogue cards to your deck, like taking out the meta cards that your opponent is going to play around.
Yeah.
It works until you get to Top Cut. I remember.
That's true,
I think
yeah.
it was one time. I don't know what deck it was. Was it Monohan, George? We were talking about, and you're like, I think I want to cut Han.
Oh
unit.
yeah. The discussion was
Yeah.
is Han unit the 7-cost one? Is that win more? Is it optimal? And can I? Oh god, this is a whole other rabbit hole. But we'll try and keep it brief. Yeah, we can talk about this for hours. Well, like is it technically win more? What is the value of it? And is it worth putting in the sideboard? And the long story short of that conversation was, I don't think there's ever a world where you go down to 0, because in a top cut situation, you're giving your opponent the green light to put you in the black hole, which is the reference to if your only response to Han Solo unit is bounce, they will just play the Han Solo unit and kill whatever you play, and you have to go not just 1 wide but 2 wide on any given turn to be able to come back from that.
Right.
And they also have all their stuff. So
Yeah, so if they know your main
Yes.
deck doesn't have the Han at all, they never have to play around it, which
Right.
opens up a lot of counterplay to the Han strategy, because a lot of it usually revolves around I'm gonna have 7 resources after I attack with Han, and I'm either gonna DJ you or I'm gonna play a 7-drop from hand, and the way that you counterplay one or the other is vastly different than the latter, right? So if they know that they can check a box off on one of those cards not being in your hand because they saw your deck list and there's no copies of it, then it gets much easier for them to enact a game plan to counter that. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's super
sometimes
interesting.
in deck building, knowing whether your opponents will see your list matters.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
comes
I
up.
mean, that's an interesting topic all on its own of should there be open deck lists at all? Doesn't make sense for only top cut? I think a lot of different card games have gone down that rabbit hole and tried to find a happy medium.
They tried to in this game. They tried to make it every single round.
Yeah.
When the game first came out, that was the rule. And
Yeah,
everybody was
that's
like,
just
no,
too
we're not
much.
doing that. We're not doing that. Even the organizers at the time were like, no, we're not doing that.
It's just too much. That one itself is just, if every single round I have to have a separate deck list that I need to bring with me and hand to my opponent, and the first minute before we play is us reviewing each other's deck list.
Yeah.
That's just, 1, it's not that fun. 2, it's kind of a hassle in terms of timing because now every round is longer. And 3, it's just, I don't know, it just kind of takes the magic out of it, for me at least. I don't hate, I think I would prefer no open deck lists at all, but I think the biggest downside to that, which obviously we're part of a large team, so we could take advantage of that the most, but large teams like the Bothan Network can go to a tournament, and if we have a bunch of players there, we can go scout around, and people who finish, there are Sabine players who finish their rounds really fast can go scout around the top tables and see what people are playing and then report back to the team. So obviously that's also not fun. 1, it's not fun to do the scouting really. I mean, it's information or whatever, but it's kind of takes the heart and soul out of the game. Yeah. So I don't know.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah,
So.
I think that just in top cut is fine. I guess it adds an extra layer that you have to think about, which is kind of cool. But
I mean, if I was a selfish competitive player, having perfect information on my opponent's deck list, what their sideboard decisions were, how many in-game threats they're running, how many removals, what their removal suite is, this is all invaluable information. If you're in a typical card game, every action you're making bets of I don't think my opponent has the punish here, or they're signaling to me this, I think they have this, and you're making bets constantly while you're playing Star Wars Limited. If you know their deck list, that raises the level or the bar so much higher, right?
yeah, agreed.
But that's at the sweatiest level, right? Do the average people who's looking to have fun and has their cool deck and wants to compete in an event, but like maybe is not making a podcast, like
Right, right.
do they want to be reading a checklist every single is that more fun
Yeah.
to them? And like,
Right.
I seriously doubt it. I think it's a better event, a smoother event, faster for obvious reasons.
It's a little more
to not
exciting
have.
too. Like,
It's more what?
sit down. It's a little more exciting. You sit down from your opponent and you start thinking about what could they have, and as the game goes on, you're thinking more about that instead of trying to remember what they have. Yeah. So George,
sorry, you can go, Jonathan.
I was just gonna ask before we close. Like, we're gonna close things out soon. What are there any parts of your process that you think we didn't cover when it comes to assessing a new environment, deck building in new environments?
When it comes to new environments part, no. I mean, like, obviously we didn't talk about hypergeometrics that much. We didn't talk about.
Oh yes, plenty to talk about.
I guess the biggest thing that I didn't really touch on is like when you're talking about why you're building a deck, like, understand, are you building this deck to achieve a certain purpose? Are you building this deck to just play a certain leader and try to optimize that leader? Are you building this deck to optimize a certain card? This takes you a lot of interesting directions. Like, I'll go back to the classic, like, Avenger Vader, like, that was a deck that was just like, I just want to play Avenger because there's no decks that have a good response. Like, once you play Avenger, that is inevitability that most decks can't even come close to. And like, how do I build a deck that, okay, well, if you Super Laser Blast turn before Avenger, you can da-da-da-da. That's an example of that, where like Jango is just like, what units do I have that deal damage when they enter play?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all these units deal damage when they enter play. Now I can abuse this. That works with that leader.
Right.
Like, identifying what kind of where you're coming from helps you figure out where you're going with your list and strategy.
Yeah, for sure.
And Ian, anything come to mind for you? Deck building in a new environment that we didn't cover?
No, I think we covered a lot of really great points. I think that it would be really cool to have George back on one week, maybe like halfway through the set or something, when the meta's established, and do like a whole video where we like do a podcast of him going through and actually build a deck with these strategies in mind, and like kind of give the audience like a real life example of like how he does this, because I think that would be super awesome. Even if it's just like, we come out of it just with like a deck that's, more theory based than it is like fully finished or whatever, but just to see how you apply these kind of concepts and make it reality. I think that would be really awesome as like a companion to this episode.
I'd be happy to come on
after he wins a 5K.
And like, it starts with theory. When you're truly revolutionizing something, when you're truly pushing the bounds, it starts with theory, and then you make it reality.
Yep.
So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think my last piece to mention in terms of deck building a new environment, something that I find useful is to focus on proactive strategies. I don't quite know what I'm going to run into in the first few weeks of a new environment. So I prefer to present problems to my opponent, present a plan that I know executes well, lines that I've worked out, and I know what I want to be doing with my deck when I sit down and get across from my opponent. Almost a little bit, no matter what they are. I'm going to adjust to what kind of deck they're playing as the games go on. But I want to be proactive.
Yeah.
And not make too many assumptions about the meta. Like right now, we can assume there's going to be Jangos out there. There's going to be Hans. There's going to be Sabines. I can test against those decks and try to make sure my deck plays well into them. But I still want to be very proactive at the start of a meta. That's kind of one of my approaches.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons that I never play a control deck in the first week of a format.
Right.
Because I think it's really hard to figure out exactly what tools and removal pieces, especially in a game like Star Wars Unlimited, where a lot of the removal pieces have some sort of restriction on them. right? So like, you know, is Takedown relevant in this meta? Is Fell the Dragon relevant in the meta? Is new cards like Direct Hit relevant in the meta? Like, do those fall on the curve in a way that you can create a good control game plan? I don't know the answer to those things because we don't really know the meta. So I think it's really risky to take a deck where you just kind of hope that this is what it is, and maybe you did some testing and you had some success with it in testing, but then you go to a tournament and it's different than what your testing environment was, and now your removal isn't lining up the way you wanted it to, right? So
yeah, it goes everywhere from I can pay 6, kill whatever I want, or I can pay 3, and you know what? You kill whatever you want.
yeah, exactly.
I love so many options. Awesome. Such diversity. and as someone who has been a control diehard most of the life cycle of Stars Unlimited, there's a spectrum, right? It's not, you know, you have everything from fatigue, I am just looking at your deck and going to run you out of threats, to, you know, oh, I'm playing a lot of unit-based removal, and it's like, you know, ambushers, and it's still developing threat and removing units, but you know, I'm control, but like my control comes as, in the shape of a 5/7 ambusher, you know. So
I start with unit-based removal at the start of a set. If nothing else, it's a unit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, great. Thanks for coming, George. This is
Thanks
great. We love
me.
having you. I think people are going to love, you know, hearing your ideas, and hopefully look forward to hearing some more, getting you back on the show.
Yeah.
Love to be back, obviously.
Upcoming shows. We have Michael Karlak coming. That's going to be on our next episode. We're going to talk about the origins of Bothan Network, how to build a testing group if you're somebody that has a lot of friends and you want to figure out how to organize them a bit more. We're going to tell you our story, and maybe you can apply some of those ideas. March 26th, we're going to have Frank Myers. We're going to hype up Beatle. We're going to talk about what to expect there, what to expect for people that are actually coming to the event and people that are just wanting to tune in. And we're just going to have Frank, right? It's going to be a show. It's going to be a show with Frank, no matter what happens. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting.
Miss that. Absolutely
and you can't miss that.
Yeah, that's must-watch TV.
March 2nd. March 2nd is going to be the show after Beatle, in which we will bring George back as a winner of the 6K. Actually, I don't know if you're able to make it. Are you going to be at? You're going to be at Beatle, right?
Oh yeah, I got me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's me, Guy, and Coach Amron.
That's right.
3 team. We're gonna represent the swamp. And
well, you're not winning the 3v3. That's the only event I'm playing in.
Okay,
so.
I'll see you in the finals.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll see you in the finals. But we will try to get a winner from that event, like maybe the winner of the 6K if we can get them on. Maybe someone from the 3v3. I don't know. We'll bring you someone that can talk about their experience there.
Yeah, or just someone who had a really cool deck that like kind of blew everybody away. You know,
We're gonna bring somebody from Beatle.
Yeah.
Expect that March 2nd. And during Beatle, and we'll get into more details in that March 26th show. We are talking about things like doing a recap show every day during Beatle, and I think you should expect that. I don't see why we wouldn't do it. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be down there.
I don't know how much sleep I'm going to get, but it's going to be an amazing weekend. So I'm hyped.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yep. So we'll see you there before Beatle. We'll see you there every night during Beatle, and we'll see you right after.
For sure.
So thanks, guys. Have a great night. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Peace out.
Hulk smash.
Bye.
I love that, George.
I'm stopping my audio.